Jordan, I died when we had our Friday meeting, and I was talking about YY and YY from off camera. We have no idea he's there. Oh, other people call me YY too.
They call me YY too.
So
He was like,
funny.
yeah, everybody calls you YY.
But I'm an adult.
I've never heard anybody call him YY. Poor YY. I think I've told people around here. And they're like, oh yeah, I went to school with his sons. I'm like, oh, you went to school with Harrison Hunt or YY?
And they're
I'm
like,
like,
YY?
YY? Who's YY?
Oh my gosh. For
Sorry,
people,
Wyatt.
yeah. He'll always be YY to me after that that drive we had from Austin to San Antonio 10 years ago where God, I'm hungry. I want some chicken nuggets. There's nothing here, Wyatt. Nothing. There's nowhere to stop. So we
Nothing
keep
on
passing.
35.
Yeah, Waterburger billboards. It's like exit now. All the food you can eat. Oh, Dad. So anyway. Oh, here we go. All right.
Hello.
Today on Beer Net Radio, I'd like to welcome to the show the gentleman from Hohenstein's. Hohenstein's is a Minneapolis, St. Paul area beer wholesaler, Molson Coors Pabst House, who also specializes in craft. And now, of course, in the last few months, THC beverages. And so, of course, that's what we're here to talk about today, as THC beverages are now going through some of the same retailers in Minneapolis or Minnesota, like Cub Foods and Total Wine in the state, as beer. So welcome, gentlemen. Before we get into it, there's a few of us on the call. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourselves, I think that would make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, so my name's Chris Fream. I'm been a brand manager at Hohenstein's for I believe 7 years now, a little over that. Been in the beer industry, selling cider and beer and everything in between since about 2009, give or take.
Cool. Yeah, I'll jump in here. My name is Jesse Foolbear. I'm our off-premise chain sales manager. So I manage kind of all of our regional, national chains here in the cities. And plus, I have under me 3 sales reps dedicated to THC sales and location sales. So
Awesome. Thank you.
And I'm Joe Anderson. I take care of the chains, pricing, communication, stuff like that for regional and national chains.
Cool. Awesome. Well, welcome, guys. Thank you for being here today. I mean, you guys are kind of on the ground at ground zero for these kinds of beverages selling in more traditional channels, and it's really interesting. Everybody's looking at it. So before we dig into that and how things are going so far, I don't know who wants to take this one. I don't know, maybe Chris. I'm not sure, but can you walk us through at a very high level the law locally? Like, this has to be hemp derived, right? And it's got to be a certain amount of milligrams. And why did that need to be legalized locally when the Farm Bill already kind of covers hemp?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So we've always kind of joked that in the last year, we've learned more about one subject than we ever did in like 4 years of college. Because we really just wanted to make sure there's so much gray area with this that we just needed to make sure everything was buttoned up and make sure we were doing it appropriately. So one thing that we were touting since day one was self-regulating responsibly, because there is a lot of gray area in a lot of the regulations right now. I mean, prohibition ended 90 years ago, and we've been updating that almost every year since then. This pretty much became legal in 2018 with the Farm Bill, and we've been adding things to it, but we're talking 4 years versus a century of changes. So really what happened in Minnesota was that the Farm Bill in 2018 did make hemp legal, and hemp was defined as containing less than 0.3% of Delta-9 THC or THC. And this kind of opened up the door for just a wide range of cannabinoids, because the cannabis plant has hundreds upon hundreds of cannabinoids. And really, we only kind of worry about the big four: THC, CBD, CBG, and CBN. And obviously, the one that most people know about is the THC, the one that gives you the psychedelic feelings and stuff like that. So in Minnesota, with the Farm Bill, totally federally legalized hemp and kind of made way for a lot of these other cannabinoids to become legal. But what happened in the summer of, I believe it was 2022, in July, when our legislation accidentally legalized marijuana, what really happened was they took the broad spectrum of all of the cannabinoids that were made legal in the Farm Bill, and they narrowed it down. So really, they didn't make anything more legal. They just actually gave some guidelines to it. And that's when a lot of people just kind of jumped in being like, okay, we've defined that Delta 9 THC is legal in Minnesota as of July 1st. And that's kind of where that confusion came, because people didn't really understand exactly what Delta 9 meant in relation to the Delta 8s, Delta 10s, all the other various minor cannabis. So when that became legal, we really just kind of jumped in and were watching it. And that's when a couple of our supplier partners did as well. And that happened July 1st of 2022. And by August 1st, we had our first pallet and we were selling our first products of it. And then the ride started. And then we had to kind of figure out what was going on and start building the plane as we were flying it, as we've been saying.
Yeah. So you've had these products now for more than a year.
Yeah. We're starting to recycle numbers and stuff now too. So, yep.
Got it. Cool. Well, if you guys could maybe walk us through, that first year and just in recent weeks and months, these more high profile mainstream retailers obviously are taking these products on. So how has that gone? What are you guys seeing? How big is it getting for you? How big of a deal is it becoming to your business?
So it is becoming an important part of our business, but it's also, you got to kind of keep in mind that we don't have draft sales of this stuff. There is still a lot of hesitation out there. We knew getting into this that there was going to be a high level of education that we would have to teach not only ourselves and our staff, but we'd have to teach retailers enough that they could teach customers enough so that everybody felt more comfortable about this. And I mean, internally, we even saw it that first month. We had questions like, well, do we put it in a special part of the warehouse? Like, should we kind of lock it up? Do we sample it at our sales meetings? Like, kind of what do we do? So we were just like everybody else, really kind of hesitant at first of what we had on our hands. And a lot of our salespeople, they signed up to sell beer and alcohol. They didn't really sign up to sell THC. So we also wanted to be very conscious of that. And we knew, the only thing that we knew for sure is that there was a demand out there, that people were interested in THC. They wanted an easy way to obtain it and a legal way of obtaining it, and also know what they're getting as well. So we kind of went into it thinking, we know the demand is high. We have no idea what kind of inventory or anything to purchase or to start with. So we, did a lot of trial and error with our first brand, which was Trail Magic. A lot of trial and error on both sides, and really, again, harped on that idea of self-regulating responsibly. So just kind of looking at how the route to market went, this is when we created essentially Jesse's team, because we knew we were going to have to open up new accounts. We believed vape shops were going to be a big thing, tobacco shops, a lot of these kind of non-traditional accounts. And the way we looked at them is a lot of them are in the same strip malls or connected to tobacco or to liquor stores and places to get alcohol. And again, should specify in Minnesota that we still have 3-2. We're the last 3-2 states. So we have specific independent liquor stores, not grocery stores. Grocery stores do have liquor stores. They just need a separate entrance. But we knew our truck was going to be in these parking lots anyway. Let's, start visiting these stores. But one of our first learnings really quick was the customer base for this and the retailer base was not who we really thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be what we call now legacy THC users. And the retailers are going to be tobacco shops. And we learned pretty quick that that's not who was purchasing. It was more of these more health and wellness type of stores, hair salons. And actually, since the inception of this, we've seen non-alcoholic liquor stores open up, stores that are a liquor store, but don't sell any alcohol, which that concept is kind of brand new to us, and we never thought something like that would happen. But that is really the channel that a lot of these customers are picking it up. But because it wasn't who we thought it wasn't the legacy THC users, kind of the demand that we know is out there wasn't being picked up all that quickly. The rate of sale wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be. The volume wasn't as big as we thought it was going to be. But it was definitely enough for us to jump in on it and kind of bet on it, thinking this could be, a viable part of the business. So that's kind of the direction that we took with it. And kind of since then we've learned a lot, and open up a lot of new retailers, a lot of new accounts too for us.
So did it change more dramatically, in terms of the volume and that sort of thing, when the bigger retailers got in?
It did and it didn't. It did in the sense that, yes, if Total Wine brings in most products, it is going to have a nice little jump to it. But again, kind of that stigma that even we saw internally of, do we lock it up? Do we sample it? Doing all that. That was market wide of people having concerns and what's legal, what's not, how is it going to make me feel? Is it too strong? Is it not? All these kinds of things. So that also translated down to retail and chains. So when Total Wine first started, they only started with 3 out of the 10 stores here. Cub Foods only started with a handful of test stores as well. So while it's great to get the big chains on and start moving that direction, which will just help further kind of get that stigma away, they were also a little hesitant in getting into it. So it's almost a little blessing in disguise. It made it a little more manageable to handle a couple of stores coming in at a time versus just opening the floodgates that we were, again, kind of anticipating happening once they officially added it to the liquor law, or the liquor store law, to be able to carry hemp-derived Delta-9 products.
Right. And then just one quick more from me, because I know Jordan has a bunch of great questions. So you kind of mentioned it's an important part of your business going forward. I know you can't give me any specific numbers, but can you kind of quantify a little bit where it is, in terms of your mix right now, any sort of, general?
Yeah. Well, without going into the specific numbers, we've seen the mix of sales on our trucks continuing to be higher and higher. Every month is a little bit higher, a little bit higher.
Yep.
And yet in June, when the legislation went through and officially put it on the liquor store licensing, we did see a nice lift there and a nice bump there. But yet every month, it just kind of keeps growing a little bit more, specifically on the dollar side, but also in the case side, it continues to grow pretty steadily, actually.
Are y'all carrying anything besides beverages, like gummies or edibles, or just beverages for now?
We do have 5 varieties of gummies right now. And we really kind of, we carry them. It's not a major focus of ours. And really the main reason for that is the consumption occasion and the consumption rituals of the beverages is completely different than any other sort of THC consumption ritual. The idea that you drink these to get high is kind of a common misconception with them, because at the beverages at this price and this low dose, it is the least economical way to get high. And we draw a lot of parallels to the beer industry, where when we talk about beer and ABVs and stuff, we don't just talk about getting drunk and getting intoxicated. If we did, we would all just be, selling hard spirits and taking shots all the time, but we're not. We have low dose beer and stuff like that. And there is a great number of similarities we're seeing between the two categories. And it's actually following kind of the beer model more so than we believed it was going to be. We thought it was going to follow more of the dispensary channel. So just kind of going back to the gummies thing, we carry them, we sell them, they sell decently, but the beverages is really our focus, and it's really what we're good at too. We're a beverage wholesaler. It's what we know.
Right. So in going into some of these bigger retailers, the Total Wines, Cubs, what kind of space have you seen them giving to you, this dedicated space for THC beverages? Is it near? Is it a good part of the store? Is it kind of tucked in the back? You said they were still kind of unfamiliar with what to do with all this.
Yeah, I don't know if Jesse or Joe want to take that. They spend more time in the accounts than I do.
Yeah, I guess I can jump in here. I think especially with like the our large like Total Wine and some of the regional chains jumping in, is that they are getting behind it. They at least kind of can see the future, so they're kind of full on giving, like, they call it the A1 display spot. So kind of right when you walk in the door, you see it. When you walk into Total Wine, there's a local place here called Cub. Same thing, where they're going ahead and kind of just getting behind it, and which is kind of nice because also like kind of back to the earlier question of like what change did it make is kind of levels the playing field almost, where when you have multiple different channels that can sell one product, pricing and variations can be all over the map. But when you have big players, big market players, that they can level the playing field on pricing. Somebody can charge you $20 too high. Where somebody might be charging $24.99, where the market retail should be $15.99. So big players like that, they're kind of coming in, and they're not trying to undercut anybody else. So it's just again, they're just trying to get behind it and really giving everybody the space, which is actually kind of very different from when locally like smoke shops, hemp shops, and some of these people are trying to create dispensaries. They're creating this weird, gateway where you walk in to a vestibule and you have to get through to get to see the product. Having these local liquor stores, just having it out in the open, it takes away that stigma. And I don't know, they're like it's really fun to see. It's really fun to watch. So
yeah. How it's only been a year or two, so how do they kind of set shelves, and who gets to go into the cooler if there's a cooler door, and how are they kind of making their decisions?
Well, we've been really trying to take charge on that.
Yeah.
Obviously you hear Chris, you hear his passion. So it's really been us three, me, Chris, and Joe, where we've been visiting the accounts since we kind of took off day one in August. We've been the front runners, and without trying to sound too braggy, we are the best. We've created our best portfolio. Chris has vetted 100 brands, and we have 13 on hand. So with that, we've been able to gain a lot of space on shelves, just because since day one, we've been asking and talking to the retailer. And 9 months ago, they were saying it's a hard no. 3 months after that, they were saying, okay, let's start talking. And they saw that we had the real numbers, real data, and we've been through a lot of the headaches, like kind of like Chris was saying or might have said about like inventories and can we sell it? Where do we put it in the warehouse? All the things on what somebody might go through, all the headaches. We've been through all that. I think that's kind of what helped our customers trust us as Hohensteins. So we've been getting a lot of these things when they're launching with 60% of our products. And a lot of it's based on real numbers, true numbers that we've built up and we've been able to show, and then either highlight a local brand or a national brand. So yeah.
I'll jump in there too. We've had these relationships for a long time, with Total Wine, Cub, things like that. So I think they look at us and then they trust us on all the vetting that Chris has been doing on all these products and all these suppliers and stuff like that too. So, we've been selling beer to them for years and years and years, and we've been a trusted partner. So they go, all right, well, we're going to trust you guys and all the data you guys have been doing, all the work that you guys have been doing. So that's another aspect on top of the numbers and such.
So I'm curious, obviously you guys are the experts, not only in your state, but in some ways, in the country, because this is a sort of a different model than in a lot of states. So are you guys hearing from other states' distributors? Are they asking you guys a whole bunch of questions? Does there seem to be a lot of interest in this model?
Yeah, actually, I've in previous jobs, I've worked in the Midwest in various states, various distributors and stuff. And yeah, I've definitely had a couple old friends reach out, asking kind of what's going on and what the story is. And really, when we kind of look at a national perspective, the 2018 Farm Bill made this legal for a lot of places and a lot of states. And then states kind of decided which of the more minor cannabinoids were legal or not legal. So in Minnesota, we had Delta 9 wasn't clearly defined until 2022, but around the country, a lot of the national suppliers we have, they are shipping direct to consumer as well because it's hemp based, it's federally legal and federally covered. And one of the more interesting conversations I had with one of the larger suppliers was, I asked them why they were getting into hemp in Minnesota. And at the time we were calling it kind of the 3-2 of the cannabis industry. Why were they getting into it? And one of the answers that was just kind of has always resonated with me was that Minnesota is one of the last kind of easy states to go legal. And now it's actually kind of looking like recreational going legal. Ohio is right. I think they either just passed or are about to. And then after that, the second half of the country is pretty staunchly against it. The kicker is that the hemp is already legal there in many cases and is already in these markets and in these states. And in a lot of cases, the beverages are already there because they're getting shipped directly. So I think it's also important that, a lot of distributors around the country really do take notice of this and see what's happening, because it's already kind of there. And if they aren't kind of tapping into it and looking, they may, either miss the boat or, well, in our case, it took us about a year to kind of figure out a lot of the nuances. And I don't think that's going to get easier for a lot of people around the country, because again, the industry is incredibly young, and there does need to be more regulations. It's very rare to hear, a company like ours being like, "Can we get some more regulations, please?" Because we're in a very highly regulated industry. And it's also another belief of why we feel that the hemp beverages should follow kind of this 3-tier model that we have, because of the uncertainty behind it that a lot of people have. The 3-tier system really adds a lot of checks and balances that a regulated market needs. And this one's no different. I believe we'll get there. It's just going to take a little bit of time to get there. But just kind of to go back to the question about other distributors reaching out, we've been sharing contact information with South Dakota and Iowa's looking at it. Wisconsin, I know, is on the board. But the big 4 states that I've had most communication between my suppliers, not direct with the states, where New York has gone back and forth a few times. They're definitely high on there. Texas and Florida have been in the news a decent amount. So there's kind of the big 4 states. But again, Iowa, the Dakotas are looking. If you're not paying attention and not looking now, you're already behind a little bit.
Right, because it seems like with the Farm Bill, it is sort of not a backdoor way for these things to flow in, but because there is so much misunderstanding, and you do see even in Texas where there's not a legal rec market, I'll drive by a kind of a head shop that's like, THC with the little triangle, right? Is that Delta 9? Is that what the triangle means?
Yeah. So just kind of real high level on what the Delta 9 specifically is. So Delta 9 specifically speaks to the shape of the THC molecule. So Delta 9 is the most common THC molecule that everybody's familiar with that has more of the psychedelic effects. So your body has 2 receptors, CB1 and CB, that react to these. And there's a bunch of minor cannabinoids. So the other one that a lot of people hear about is Delta 8. Mm-hmm. So Delta 8 and Delta 9 are essentially the exact same thing. The biggest difference is there's a one bond in there that is in a different spot. And it doesn't bind as strongly to a CB1 receptor. Mm-hmm. So you don't feel as much of the high effects. And I think a lot of those minor cannabinoids, like the Delta 8, the Delta 10, and there's a lot, HHO, THCP, there's a whole slew of them that me as a cannabis user for 20 years thought I knew something. About a year and a half ago, I realized I did not know nearly as much as a lot of the people in the industry. And so those types of things, where they started getting kind of a bad rap, is that they are found naturally in the plant, but in very low amounts. So they started being synthetically created. Yeah. And this added a whole nother market that added a lot of confusion and just gray area that people just didn't know exactly what was happening. So once you start manufacturing something and changing it without regulations, you don't know what you're getting. Where Delta 9 is specifically the THC molecule that is found naturally in the plants, that has more of that euphoric psychedelic feeling when it binds to your receptors. So Delta 9, every time we say Delta 9, it's regular THC.
Okay.
It's a very general, I should say, also a very general explanation of what the Delta 9 is.
But that can be hemp derived.
Yes.
Without being synthetically modified.
Correct. Yeah, okay. It's in the larger amounts. So the way I kind of describe hemp versus marijuana, they're both part of the cannabis family, but hemp and marijuana are 2 completely different kind of strains or families within that. So the way I explain to people, it's like you have 2 jalapeno plants, but one is way spicier than the other because it has way more capsaicin in it. Yeah. So that one's your marijuana plant, and the sweet jalapeno pepper over here without the spice, that's your hemp. So if you want that much spice, you just need way more plants to get it out, but it is the same molecule at the end of the day. So it is the exact same thing.
Yeah. Do consumers seem to care, or are they aware of, hemp derived THC versus marijuana derived THC? Is there anyone that thinks, oh, well, I want this one because it appears better?
Yeah, there is and there isn't. There's a lot of consumers that are learning, just like the rest of us are learning about this category and what things are. And a lot of the flashier news things were about how manufactured Delta 8 and stuff like that had various other things in it. But I would say the biggest difference between the hemp derived Delta 9 in the beverages versus what people are more familiar with through the dispensary channel is that these are what they call a THC emulsion. So the molecule itself actually has like a lipid barrier, so it has an oil barrier around it. And that doesn't mix with liquids or water. So they have to strip that barrier around it. And that's what creates the emulsion. So it kind of like shrinks the molecule down a little bit. And when you do that, when you consume it, it starts absorbing through your mouth and your throat. And this is what gives you the fast acting. So a lot of people have seen fast acting THC out there. This is specifically what they're talking about, is this emulsion where it absorbs right away, where everybody's a little more familiar with the edible that you eat it, goes into your belly, takes an hour and a half to hit. And then when it hits you, you kind of don't know what you're going to get too. And that's because it processes through the liver. And the liver actually turns it into 11-hydroxy THC, which is, I believe I've heard it's like 3 times stronger than regular THC. And that's, again, everybody's heard of a story of themselves or a friend who took an edible and they got a little too high, which again, just kind of goes back to that stigma of like, everybody knows that, where again, the experience, the occasion, and just the consumption ritual of the beverages, it's completely different than what you would get at a dispensary than smoking it or eating your traditional edibles.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I mean, brands are important. Suppliers are important. You had mentioned suppliers. Do you think that beer suppliers will end up kind of owning this market? I mean, we're seeing some, obviously Indeed has some THC beverages. Brooklyn is starting to like kind of dip a fingernail in there, right? I think some of them are kind of hedging their bets because they do think, okay, we don't want to be caught flat-footed here. So, what makes a good supplier of these types of beverages? Do you think beer will win there? Beer suppliers will win there?
It's my prediction. It's my guess that they will get into this beverage market. Again, because it is different than the dispensary market. It's different than the recreational. So when you go to a dispensary, you got to, go through the front door, past an armored guard, and then into the next room where you have to scan your driver's license and put it in a database. And then you don't get to stand there and shop around either. You have to go through a bud tender who sells you products. Where now with these beverages, again, different occasion, different consumption ritual, you can walk into, for example, Total Wine, stand in front of the shelf by yourself, shop, grab what you want, and you don't even need to talk to the register or the person at the register half the time. You can just grab it and go. So getting that route to market and that ease to it, I think a lot of people are going to discover themselves how different this is than the dispensary channel. And again, we've been seeing the trends following essentially the craft beer boom, which I'm more familiar with because I've been in the industry just the last 15 years during this. Right. A lot of similarities with that. And I think it's going to follow the same way, where eventually you'll see these regional brands being purchased by the larger breweries and stuff like that.
Interesting.
I was going to ask real quick since we're talking about suppliers, is there any obligation for a brewer that's in your portfolio, if they come out with a THC beverage, to send it through, their beer distributor, or can they pick whoever they want?
I technically, these are non-alcoholics. They could self-distribute. They could go with whoever they want. But again, it is our business. It's what we know. But we firmly believe that a product like this should be regulated and go through a 3-tier system. So that's the model we are trying to kind of push it into. And just in our market, it is actually quite clear that the distributor model is more successful than the self-distributing model in the metro area. It is just very obvious. And I think one of the biggest things is that it's very easy for us to go to a liquor store. We're already there. It's what we're already doing versus building a complete network from the beginning by yourself, which, I mean, a lot of breweries have done it. A lot of breweries have been successful with it, but if you don't need to, why would you? I suppose is how it's going.
Yeah. And
I think something fun.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think something fun in that question. Sorry, was recently a brewery locally produced a THC product that we were actually able to. We are now distributing that THC product, while a different distributor is actually selling their beer. So,
interesting.
So, kind of further on that question is it's not so much like a brand extension where it's legally bound to the distributor that they can actually shop it around a bit. So
right. Interesting. Does that other wholesaler also carry THC beverages or no?
They do now.
Oh, they do now. Okay. Yeah.
Well, they do now. They just chose not to go through certain channels.
Okay.
We're talking about all these non-traditional channels. So the brand shopped it to us because they knew we have a much further reach.
Got it.
Than their place.
Yeah, it's been interesting. So we now have customers that are hardware stores, hair salons, a jewelry store, as well as tobacco shops. There's still a handful of them that are viable. We really found that the volume of this stuff was health and wellness, and the consumer also was skewing more female and older, which was not, again, what we were expecting or thinking it was going to be. Here we are, and just kind of learn that through the year.
But like Whole Foods doesn't carry these products in your market, right? Or Sprouts or any like the natural grocer type? Not yet.
Our co-ops do. Okay. A lot of the co-op grocery stores will. But that being said, we have been in touch with a lot of chains asking about it and, kind of looking through it. And one of their biggest challenges is the fact that they do cross state lines, and different states will have different laws. And within those laws, there's still a long way to go to define a lot of it. So that's probably the biggest challenge right now for a customer like Whole Foods. But again, if Whole Foods isn't looking at it, I believe that they're kind of missing the mark as well. Because we're also seeing that the functionality side of these beverages, with the CBD, the CBN, and CBG, the other kind of cannabinoids that are in there, they all have what many believe to be health benefits from them, and people are going in that direction with it as well.
Yeah. And then go ahead, Jay.
I was just going to ask, is there any insight as to what's kind of pulling off the shelf? Is it a functional benefit? Is it a recognizable brand name? Is it the dosage? What have you seen that gets consumers' attention?
Yeah, I will say the first pushback we got was, please not another seltzer. There was a lot of seltzers, and I think a lot of that might also be just fatigue from all of these seltzers 2 or 3 years ago as well, where just kind of everybody saw it and everybody jumped in and created one. So one of the earlier things we saw was definitely flavor was number one choice for a lot of people. The classic liquid to lips. I've heard that a lot this year. And then after that, it seemed to be the milligram dosage, which in Minnesota, the max is 10 milligrams per package on a beverage. 5 milligrams per serving, and beverages are able to have 2 servings. So that's the max. Again, just kind of going back to the how uneconomic it is to purchase these to get high. It's a lot for most people. 40 milligrams or more is quite a bit, and that'll get people pretty high. But 4-packs here, the lowest I've ever seen them was about $14, $15. The highest I've seen them was like $40. So the price range on a lot of these are kind of across the board as well. So.
Now, I was curious, now that some of the bigger retailers are getting into them, how do the velocities compare to craft beer?
I'll let Joe or Jesse, do you guys have a little more insight on the velocities?
Ooh, I
We're
mean,
still
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
we're still figuring that out. I mean, it
Okay.
depends on the area it is. I mean, we cover a very big footprint, so it depends on the type of store, the type of city, all those things. So it kind of runs the gamut. I mean, as far as like craft beer, it's kind of hard to compare it a little bit.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, that makes sense. And then, but what about the margins? I mean, that's probably hard too, right? Because you're having to stop at different stores that you might not have been stopping at before, and that kind of eats in a little bit, I would think. But I don't know how you calculate it.
Mhm. Yeah. Generally, the margins are going to be a little bit higher because again, it was something that wasn't defined before any of this started. So um, we wanted it to be higher than the beer margins, but we also don't want to be in the price gouging area.
Right.
And
Yeah.
we're seeing at retail there is, and that was actually one of the first things that we also kind of noticed between the tobacco channel and the liquor store channel or the health and wellness channel that we had been working with. Is that tobacco shops work on a way higher margin than our liquor stores do. So it caused a lot of friction between the two. Um, and then you kind of pile in on that. There's different cities have different moratoriums and licensing and all that kind of stuff. So out at retail, there was some button heads between tobacco shops and liquor stores. And a lot of it was kind of the margin based, just because liquor stores worked on a little bit lower. But yeah, as a general whole, everybody's making a little bit more margin than the beer side. It's not outrageous, it's not bigger, but a little bit higher margin. And then the general cost of a lot of the cases is like a high end, very premium craft beer as well. So they're definitely higher ring cases, and then you throw the margin in there, so it is definitely higher. Yeah,
cool. Well, I don't know if you guys can give any, especially comparatively, how are beer sales this year? How's that end of biz, right? I don't know if, that's not what we're here for, but
yeah. No, like our beer trends at Hohenstein's, we have been having a really good year, and obviously the THC has helped. And I know there's, the national beer trends are a little bit of a cause for concern, I would think, because they're kind of trending the wrong direction. We'd all be happier if they were trending the other way. We wouldn't really be talking about it. But it is one of the first questions a lot of people ask is like, who are these consumers? Who is this pulling from? Is it pulling from beer? Is it pulling from wine? Who really is it? And it's been a year and a half, and we can't pinpoint who it's pulling from. And my gut kind of tells me it's not pulling that much from any of the alcohol space. Again, just kind of if you stand in a store and you watch the people who are coming in and purchasing, a lot of them are probably not alcohol drinkers to begin with. And we have a lot of the younger generation too that are being a little more sober curious and just not drinking for a week or not drinking for a month and just going dry. We're seeing a lot of that consumer coming over to the THC space. They still want to go out, they still want to go to the bars and socialize, and they want something in their hand. And they don't necessarily want it to be a non-intoxicating or mood-altering beverage. They just don't want to drink alcohol anymore. So I feel like a big base of this consumer is recapturing the consumer base that we may have lost on the alcohol side. And within our book, what we're up in the THC is definitely not, we're not down that in beer and not even close. So
that's good.
And we have a good number of our suppliers have had really good years as well this year that are going against national trends on that side. But it doesn't look like it's really taken anything away from beer, and overall, it's really just kind of helped our year as a whole as just supplemental on top of everything else.
Yeah. Well, y'all have, you have all the right suppliers for the year. Molson Coors, Pabst, Bell's, so y'all are doing all right. Yeah. Cool. Well, Jordan, anything else? I think that was really great and interesting, guys. I appreciate your insights, and we'll definitely keep watching. But Jay?
Yeah, no, that's it for me. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity to get on, you guys.
Thank you.
If you guys have any questions, like by all means, feel free to reach out. Obviously, I love hearing my own voice and talking about topics like this. So I could go on for a few hours if anybody's interested. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, cheers. Thank y'all very much. We'll bother you soon.
Good. Thank you.